Yeah, I think we're in a phase where everyone realized they got superpower and they can build anything. We used to only be able to automate things that are very deterministic and clear cut. Now we're able to automate things with judgment because workflows are not always hard, right? Some are soft, but you can teach your agent that if we're all enabled in this software utopia to have exactly the workflows and the apps that we want, how do we work together?
You're listening to Data Renegades, a regular series where we discuss data, code, culture, and everything in between. We interview pioneers of tools and concepts we now use every day in the data world. These ideas often started as experimental projects or unconventional approaches. The builders are renegades who are inspiring and shaping the industry. Data Renegades is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in enterprise infrastructure. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you would like to suggest a topic, find us on datarenegades.com. Welcome to Data Renegades. I'm CL, CEO and founder of Recce, and your host on Data Renegades. Today, our guest is Maxime Beauchemin, back for the first time as a returning guest on Data Renegades Season 2. Max was on Season 1 October 2025. And a lot has happened, in the 6 months since. Welcome back, Max.
Excited to be here and excited to be a data renegade. That's the title. I should move my title to renegade. I like that.
Right. Well, thanks for spending the time here. And then for a listener who didn't catch Season 1, can you reintroduce yourself, who you are, and then what you build, and then what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I've been working in data for the bulk of my career. So I've got a career 20, 25 years now. So the gray beard. So I've been working in data for a long time at a lot of big Silicon Valley companies like Yahoo, Facebook, Airbnb, Lyft. And mostly known for the work I've done around open source. I'm the original creator of Apache Airflow, Apache Superset. So Superset, I started a company around that's called Preset, and then that's where we commercialized the open source offering of Apache Superset. Apache Superset is a killer tool, that's fully open source for people who want to get rid of the vendors and call it historically the business intelligence space, but it's very much everything data consumption related. So it's a tool that can fully replace things like Tableau and Looker and Sigma. So if you want to go open source, Apache Superset is there. If you want the convenience of SaaS, at Preset, we offer a managed offering around it with all sorts of bells and whistles. So that's what I've been up to. So I started a company back in 2019 and, still trying to take over the world of data consumption with open source.
Very cool. And then you've been working on something new, and it's a lot of things happened since 6 months. So what changed kind of your mind, working on traditional BI, well, even though it's just open source and then a very different option for people who want to consume data. But you were working on something with agents, right? What was the biggest change?
Yeah, well, so I'm a builder, so I love that the only moment where I'm truly happy and, feel good about myself is when I'm building something actively. And with everything that's been happening, in the agentic space, I felt like building something, identify the gap. I think at first, my first realization about this time last year, a little bit earlier last year, is when I started using Claude Code. I had my own Claude Code moment. And I was like, oh my God, this is changing everything. We need to completely change the way that we work. And my first sense of urgency was I need to manage a lot of agents. I need to spin one off and then spin another terminal, and created my own little kind of framework using Tmux and Vim and whatever tools that I use. So I could manage 3 agents, 5 agents, 10 agents, 20 agents, and then started suffering from a few things at the time. So first thing was that just the clarity, context shift of you're managing 12 agents and you have 12 terminal window or Tmux tabs. You start getting a little bit lost in your flow. What PR is associated here? If I need to start an environment, a Docker environment for this, what port is going to be on? So I'm, started to hit some of the clarity issue that you get when coordinating, orchestrating more than 5 agents. So I was like, okay, I need a place that's much more visual and was going to inspire to do something a little bit more like Figma. And then I guess the other pain point was, and I think it's still a pain point in the industry of like we're all running like multiple agents locally, but then we're all kind of stuck in our own Bedel terminals and set up locally. There's no way to, I cannot see what you're doing with your agents. You cannot see what I'm doing with my agents. We cannot share a dev environment. So, realizing that we needed something a lot more collaborative. I've been kind of disappointed. There's been some progress around that. I would say like Cursor and Claude Code like enables you to have multiple work trees now, but it seems like a bit of an afterthought. And then Claude Code work, maybe it's a little bit more collaborative, but like collaboration is still, for security type reasons. I think the premise is that your interaction with your agent is very personal and private, where I think today now we're trying to figure out how to work with a lot of agents and how to work with our teams. And then we need to see each other's session. So I was like, I'm going to put it all on a board, right? So I have kind of a framework that's centered around Git work trees and then have a board type UI. So I'll probably show some of that later. I should be able to share my screen. And then I wanted a highly collaborative place with a little bit of RBAC, but even like sharing configurations. There's no reason why we all need to manage our MCP or settings.json with our MCPs, right? And we might want some governance and policy. So it's like, let's bring it all in an app where we can see what each other are doing. So I built something on top of the Claude Code SDK, or I think it's called the Claude Agent SDK, the Codex SDK, the Microsoft Copilot SDK. So it's kind of a wrapper around all of these. I was also worried that, the subsidies might go from a place to another. So I didn't want to be too pigeonholed on, Claude Code. So now we have this interface that exposes all the worthy SDKs, including open code, which is pretty cool because then you get access to all the, the Chinese models if you want them. So much more open-ended platform, mostly for coding. And then, since it's so frameworky, I was able to add a lot of features like OpenClaw type features. So when OpenClaw dropped, I added the notion of Agor assistants that are long-lived agent with, memory system, skill system, that can be shared with your team. So you can create as many as these claws as you want, and then went into artifacts, which actually is a great story on its own. But for those not necessarily familiar with the term artifact, like, when you're in a Claude session or a Codex session, like sometimes you'll see your agent creating a little like React app or a document to collaborate, and that becomes a little bit of a panel. So I built that primitive into Agor too. So you can ask your agent to publish these artifacts. So so it's great for data visualization where you don't necessarily you want to shortcut, the BI tool. And maybe in some ways it's like a little bit of the future, right? So on one side, we're coming from the more traditional BI, adding agentic stuff on top of it. But on the other side, that kind of coming from agentic and adding like app making or data visualization from that front. Maybe it kind of meets in the middle,
Right. Wow. We have a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
I actually think that you are like a couple months earlier than a lot of very experienced developer I knew for a lifetime. And then they were all having this kind of not necessarily cool moment, but kind of like the Christmas break last year, right? And it got so good. And then I think everyone's like going through what you went through, like, well, this is great, but now I have so many terminal tabs. How do we kind of build something to organize that? And then your solution is a visual way of organizing agents, right? And I'm seeing that coming from kind of like the Airflow orchestration idea about how you will structure this work into a semi-pipeline, but now it's like more free form. Can you tell us a little bit about like how the kind of your past experience influenced the design philosophy for your specific flavor of agent orchestration?
Yeah. There's clearly, it's like all of my experience and intuition kind of piled up, working with different tools and maybe like a good outcome from all this work that I've done on Airflow and Superset is, I've got the background of a data engineer, but also like a software engineer. And then I became like much more, originally was more back-end Python and then, ended up being much more front-end working on Superset. So like really building application, like I kind of touched a lot of the layers of the stack. So I came from that angle, maybe like the extremely full stack person that wants to build something new, in the agentic era. And then, I was thinking like, what are the primitives here, like what is the information architecture? And then clearly, like you think of something as clear as the session, like what is a session? And the session is a clear entity. But then the work tree, I think, is very, very important too. So call it like your Git branch, or I'm pretty sure people are familiar with Git work trees. I tried the term Git work tree on Google Trends to see how many people like discover that they need to parallelize work. But like you realize like, oh shit, I should have like 5 agents and agents working in parallel. Then you cannot have a single clone. So people start by cloning the same repo multiple times and eventually discover work trees. But work tree is a really important primitive. The session, I think early on I was thinking about this time last year, I was really thinking about the context window. So forking set, I discovered you could fork sessions.
Right.
And you could spawn these subsessions too. So you can ask Claude to fire up another Claude, which it will do through the agent. I think there's a call called like agent calls of some kind where it will do that, but then you can't see what's happening in there.
Right.
Like you don't see the logs and you can't post prompt these sessions. I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way to make it easy for people to fork, to spawn subsessions. There's a feature that's more obscure that's called by the way, like BTW.
Yeah.
So while your agent is working, you could say / by the way, did you do this? Did you not do that? Or where are you at? And then that fork, that effectively like is a fork session that's short-lived. But I was thinking about these session trees and managing my context window. I was also really curious, like this time last year, I was like very focused on like controlling my context windows. I would always like / clear and like try to always have like a very clean context window. I think it doesn't matter as much now because the agents are better at compacting. But yeah, I was like, oh, I need a tool in which like forking and spawning a subsession is a primitive that, where I can see my tree of sessions. I can go and post prompt my session. So those are some of the things I was thinking about. If we look, maybe I'll share my screen just because I'm talking about like the information architecture.
Yeah, of course.
So this is one of my board in Agor. So we're in an app here, and then you can see, I'm going to try to describe what I do, but you see a board with what looks like a bit of a Kanban, right? So you have these zones. So for people on audio, you have zones like coding tasks, create a pull request, codex review, human review, and there's all these sections on like a Figma board. And then all the cards that you see here, they are effectively a work tree. So each one of these cards would be a feature. And then I was talking about the session trees, so I'll kind of show what's happening here. But you can see this session, it's a Claude Code session that spawned a subsession, for instance, to ask for a review. And then the agent that does a review. So Codex does a review of the code written by Claude. And then when it's done, it callbacks the parent with the last prompt. So then the parent is instructed to go and address, some of the feedback. Actually, I think I might be able to show a little bit how it works, but each zone gets a template prompt, right? So that when you drag a card from a prompt to another, you can have these templated prompts. So here I'm going to get an agent to create a pull request. But yeah, showing just a little bit on the lower corner. So now I'm looking like a session that's recent, but you have a button for forking, for spawning a subsession, to ask one of these by the way question. You can upload assets here too, the same way you can do in Claude Code. But overall, probably like a richer interface than what you could ever have in a CLI. So here I'm hovering over previous prompt, and you'll see like the commit before, at the beginning and at the end of the prompt. You can see your context window growing over time. So you see this kind of bar chart that's behind. This shows like the context window percentage used. So you know a little bit more visually, like when exactly something, your context window got big or when it got compacted.
Okay.
So maybe I'll hold there, but this is like just showing the spatial canvas at a high level, and then the richer session interface. There's a lot more to show in this app, but maybe we just start here. And you can see there's other people connected here too. So you see a face pile of other icons.
So I'm describing what I'm seeing is a multiplayer canvas, and then if you've used like Figma or anything, it's like you have a little bit of section, and each card is kind of like a call section or codec section, right? And then whenever you drag into the other part of the canvas, there are things that you can trigger or apply to this section. So effectively kind of a visual collaborative workflow for a lot of like concurrent agents.
Yeah, and then just to clarify too, each card is a work tree. So you can see on this particular one, I'm zooming in, it has a pull request attached to it. So the prompt I just dragged this, or I moved the work tree to that zone. And then it prompted to create a pull request and attach it to the work tree. So the agent is actually able to, of course, create the pull request, but then take the metadata and enrich so that you can have, like in some cases, you'll see some of these work trees are attached to an issue and to a PR. Something that's really cool too, and it's going to be a bit of a bag of features and probably overwhelming for people on the call. You can see that this start environment. So each repo can define one or many a set of commands to define how to start a Docker, or not necessarily Docker, but how to start a remote environment. So if I click play on this little button on this work tree, I'm starting an Agor environment in this case in Docker. But you could have your own script. Without going into too much details here, but that's all handled by configuration at the repo level. So here you can have different variants of the environment. For instance, in this repo, I've got like a SQLite mode or Postgres mode or a Docs mode, right? So there's different options around that here.
Okay, let's take a step back. Obviously, you build it for like organizing your own agent usage, right? Starting that, and then, but like it seems very full fledged now. And then, so who is this really for? And then, how are you seeing this being adopted inside the company or like outside the company?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is like people that are struggling orchestrating a lot of agents and terminals and VS Code, or where you're kind of lost with your sessions and your work trees and the PRs that they're associated to. So that would be the first, like, hey, I want a visual place where I can organize my workflow visually and interact with all my agents and do a lot of like what I call session hopping. Like you go from like, okay, this agent is done with this. Now it should be doing that, right? So that's the first thing for individuals that want more visual clarity and just better structure for their workflow, right? Keep track of a lot of things. Then the premise with Agor was always like, I want to collaborate with people I work with in their AI sessions, right? So if you're starting to see a thing where, code review is the thing that takes the most time, it's the new bottleneck or QA, and then you're like, God, I have my Git branch here that's ready to go, and then someone else got to pull it and start a Docker, and then I cannot see what's in their Docker, and then maybe they push an update, and I need to git push, git pull, Docker start, So here you can bring everyone on the same shared dev box. And then, the way it's done in Agor is each person's got their Unix user. So there's a mode where you're in strict Unix impersonation. So each user, there's proper RBAC and there's proper like, hey, this is my work tree. I don't want to give access to anyone, or I don't want to allow other people to prompt my sessions, or I want to allow this person to do that. So there's a layer of that in Agor. But if you feel like I would love to see other people's workflow and their sessions, and maybe like start bringing my best practices with their best practices on a joint board. So we do, I don't know, code review or QA or design review the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I would say that's the premise of like, you want to work with a lot of agents, but also with your team, more actively.
Yeah, I'm curious through that. So the tool enabling kind of collaboration and learning, and then kind of through that process, like what's the most surprising thing you or your teammates learn from each other with this?
Yeah, so I'll unpack just another feature in Agor, which is the assistant, so the board we were looking at just now is mostly like these coding sessions, right? One work tree per coding session on a repo. Now I added, once when OpenClaw dropped, I was like, oh wow, it's actually pretty easy and super useful to have like these long-lived agents that have a memory system, that have skills, that are connected to a handful of MCP, that have access to documentation. Maybe they have their own workflow, like they're watching your board and performing some actions for you. So I launched that probably like 3 or 4 months back internally. So like internally I could show, but we have like, the whole company can use Agor, and then everyone can come create their own board, create their own assistant, and then do coding. But also like there's been a lot of like ops use cases. So the thing that surprised me most is like how fast like everyone created their own assistants internally. So say, an ops person created a legal bot, that's like Better Call Saul. Its name is Saul. And like it's a personified, how OpenClause got like a soul.md, identity.md.
Yeah.
So we have like this acting, legal agent that has access to all of our contracts, all of our red lines. It's got access to HubSpot directly, so it can do a lot. But yeah, so the ops folks kind of went crazy. They created like a deal desk bot, like a customer success agent, an agent to help with renewals. When you get like customer renewal in a year, you have an agent that's like, hey, this customer's renewal is coming up in 3 months. Like, let's send the first email and schedule the stuff and prepare like a report of how they've been ramping on the tool. So, so more and more we see these agents joining, almost like employees.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm assuming the ops person is not a technical user, right? But he's able to build like bots or other integration. Is it completely on Agor, or does it have to go out to some way to kind of tend the agent in some way?
Yeah, it's completely on Agor. So like, I'll just show you, and I haven't really shown like this setting panel, but just going through until I get to assistant. But first, what is Agor in terms of like the primitives or like the information architectures? That there's boards. So we already look at a board, but you can create as many boards as you want. And there's, construct around repo and work trees. So Agor is well aware of like the repos you want to work with and the work trees that you've created. And then there's assistants. So that's what I'm talking about now. So anyone here can come and create a new assistant. So you just give it a name, give it a board. Like typically your assistant will have its own board. So maybe our legal bot, it's got its own legal board and it's keeping track of the contracts that are coming in.
Right.
But here there's a bunch of like these ephemeral ones, that have been created and orphaned. But then there's a bunch of bots that are very specific, long-lived, accessible in Slack for us too. So, they all have like a purpose, and a manager in some ways. And then they're all connected, with a collection of MCP. If I keep going down the list, so I'll talk about the other things. So for people that are on audio, I'm showing the settings panel, which shows all the big entities in Agor. So I just talked about assistants. And then just this notion of a card, which is metadata. So an agent that's not necessarily coding might want to put, say, contracts on a board or like customer cases or tickets, right? So that enables the agent to create a card type.
These are like entity types, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? And then that allows for the task. So if I was to go see our legal bot over here, it only has like one card right now, but it shows a bit of a Kanban, and these cards are not coding tasks, but it's a way for the agent to show you, what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's cards, which are, just bits of metadata, for visual feedback. Then there's artifacts, which I'm going to put on the side, but your agents are able to create these little React apps or, typically front-end apps. So like a dashboard or data viz or something that helps you sort your tickets, right? So the agent is able to create these small apps and publish them on board so other people can see them. So there's a whole mechanism here around like getting credentials.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, so if you create an app to help, sort deals in HubSpot, you might need a way to get an HubSpot API key so that the app can use it.
Right.
So there's a mechanism around that. Then, there's config stuff in here. So MCP servers, the agentic tools that you use. So those are the SDKs that we use in Agor. So Claude Code, Codex, Gemini, so a bunch of configuration. It's always config hell, right? When you try to give access to agents to things. But here you can control that pretty well in Agor. And then the last two entities I'm going to talk about. One is gateway channels. So that's a way to make agents available in GitHub or Slack or, eventually Discord or whatever app. So that's like a gateway to make your agent available elsewhere. And then there's users, which are, I don't want to leak personal emails, so I'm exiting here. But like users is very much like this app was built from the ground up to be like multi-user and live. So when you see someone else, you see their cursor moving around the screen, you'll see which board they're on.
Okay.
So pretty rich like multiplayer feature. Everything is live in there.
Very cool. And then so I can see a lot of interesting like core abstraction, right? Repo and then work tree and then all this different type of entity. One thing I like stood out, like, I'm curious about is that for like non-coding work, like what you were saying, like contract tracking and all that, how does like work tree come to place? Because the artifact doesn't need to kind of live on the work tree, right? So how do you kind of get the abstraction right?
Yeah. So what is an assistant in Agor? So when you go and create a new one of these like long-lived assistant, let's say we want to create like a, I don't know, help desk agent of some kind, right? So I would grow and then create this new entity. What happens behind the scene is it happens to be a work tree. So the work tree, we clone a repo that's called Agor Assistant that has pretty much the OpenClaw framework. So it has an identity.md, a soul.md, a user.md. So it has kind of a zero state, like virgin agent that has never talked to anyone. And then here I really pretty much just inspired everything from OpenClaw. So that means OpenClaw's got to bootstrap the MD file. And if the agent sees it, it means it's its first boot, which means it's got to ask you about who it is and who you are.
Yeah.
And then I added on some things to say, you are an Agor, you have full access to the Agor API. So there's an internal MCP for Agor. So that means the agent is able to create a board, to create a work tree, to put an agent to work, right? Or it's able to pretty much do anything that a user can do in Agor, the agent can do it. So when one of these assistant is created, it's really just a special work tree that is expected to be long-lived. And it's all its memory system and operating context is the file system. So, typically the assistant will be instructed to commit and push to, it's all instructed to manage its own memory system. And then typically in a heartbeat, so the heartbeat.md is also an OpenClaw concept, which is like the stuff that's supposed to run every half hour, every hour.
Right.
So say if you want to do a weekly report, you want to ask your assistant to create a weekly report, it will check to see if the report for this week is produced or not. If it's not there, we'll produce it, file it, post it on Slack. But it's effectively just a long-lived branch. The assistant is just like its old brain, is the file system, and it happens to live in a work tree that is never meant to be merged domain, basically.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I feel that the underlying construct from the LLM or coding agents are just interesting, like just a log of conversation, and then we're like choosing our entry point to direct that conversation in a meaningful way to achieve what we want to do. Right. So this is like super interesting that, I had a little bit of exposure to playing with that and then kind of creating my own orchestration as well. So I think I'm down the road like with you. And then I guess like you were saying that the system is inspired by OpenClaw, and like when should people like consider using OpenClaw or NanoClaw or the whole family like Hermes, or when should people try to use Agor?
Well, I would say the main differentiator, and I haven't looked to see where exactly the other solutions are in terms like multiplayer. But if you want to work with your team, like if fundamentally you're looking for something for yourself, maybe OpenClaw is sufficient and works. I think you can create multiple claws too in OpenClaw. Like I think when I tried it, you had only one assistant per instance. But if you want a place to work with your team, like that's collaborative. It's a little bit like, do you want Sketch or Figma? And I guess like the market has kind of spoken on that front. I guess Figma's still relevant, but like no one uses Sketch because design is fundamentally a collaborative thing where you want other people to be able to come in and add comments and interact with your design, maybe fork them. So I think if you're looking for more of a solution for your team that's less private, maybe for some of the workflows that you want to for the shared, that's a place that was built from the ground up to do that.
Got it. And I'm seeing through all this kind of different way of orchestrating agent. I think there's a clear kind of slider like where you put human in the system, right? So what's your thought about like should human be like dragging things across the board, or should the agent do that, or like when is human involved? Like in your ideal world?
Yeah, so that's what I was doing originally. It's like the system was built in a way where I created my zones, my prompt, and I was like, verifying the task and moving them along. But then I realized pretty quickly that a lot of this stuff is repetitive. It's like, it depends on the person too, and it depends on maybe the complexity of the task at hand. But say usually you want to, for the agent to do some analysis, produce a plan, and you want to review the plan pre-coding. Sometimes you don't want to review the plan. Sometimes it's just like, you know what? Like it's cheap enough. I've got enough tokens left this week. Like just go and implement it, straight. But yes, I think there are some gatekeeping at different point in time where you might want to review the plan. You probably want to review the code. You don't want the agent to merge for you. There might be like QA, and not all tasks are born equal. So the workflow might be different depending on the complexity of the task. But like what I do now is that on this board, maybe I'll go back to sharing and I'll keep describing for people on audio. But I'm going back to like the board where I do the bulk of my Agor work, right? And I could go to other boards where we're doing like superset bug fixing or security, features. But this one looks a little bit different. That's because that's my main session and that's an assistant. Mm-hmm. So this assistant here is able to process this board. So that means in its heartbeat, it's instructed to do certain things and to use judgment. So that means like there's actually, I could go deep in here. So if I go to the file, so here I'm accessing the file system and what the actual heartbeat is for this agent. But without like reading the whole thing, like every time this agent wakes up every hour, it says for each work tree on your board, if the zone is null or the zone ID is, if it's null or if it's null. Oh, that's interesting.
So basically, whatever that the agent is like allowed to move, that it will process that, right?
Yeah. So it says basically like take all the work trees on this board and introspect them. And there's some pretty extensive conditions here, but it says like, hey, if the PR has been merged, then you can move it to the done zone. Or if the plan has been produced and it looks sound, you can push the agent, you can move it to implementation. Or if it looks like there's been any like CI failure, right? If you're in the phase where there's like CI failures or some code review that needs to be addressed, like go proactively tell the agent working on this work tree to do the work. So essentially here, everything that I was doing personally as the overseer of these agents, I've kind of put into this Agor assistant to do it for me. And then there's some fine tuning over time. You're like, hey, this is a bit of a special case. If there's like some review and there are like controversial things, like just put it in like needs human attention for me, ping me on Slack so you can really fine tune your workflow.
That's super interesting. Yeah. So the kind of side project I built is called Space Dock, like building a spaceship. And then it has a very similar concept where you have a first officer that is able to move things across workflow when it is allowed to. And then basically the workflow describes what good looks like for each and every stage. But it's intentionally kept very, very minimal. It's just a README file and a YAML from matter for describing the stages. So I guess like I'm seeing like this type of construct like in various systems, like everyone has their own flavor of that. I mean, it's a very weird time, like especially you're coming from open source, right? Now it's just like, well, code is cheap, right? Everyone can just like get inspired by others and implement their own. Where do you see this go? Like everyone having their own kind of personal flavor of agent management, or are we kind of consolidating into a common practice?
Yeah, like things go through phases where, there's deconsolidation and then reconsolidation maybe. I think we're in a phase where everyone realized they got superpower and they can build anything. And that's kind of what I did with that. I feel like what I've built, I think is highly relevant. And there might be like, 10 projects like it that are more relevant. I don't know. But one thing is like, it certainly becomes possible for anyone to automate anything or to build any tool or to define their own workflows. The question is like, when you boil down the essence of the framework, right? What are the pieces that should be hard and, kind of behind like constraints and guarantees, and what are the parts that should be soft? I think it's the tough thing to do in the age of AI here.
Right.
Here I was like, okay, you're going to get a board. Like, do we all agree that we need like a visual support to see our sessions where, spatial memory is really, a human spatial memory is really good. So I was like, okay, a board definitely helps. We need that. Then we need repos and work trees for the coding task, right? Like the agent should know, yeah, I need to add a repo. I need to create a work tree for this feature. So I thought those were very kind of solid things that should be baked deep in the framework than user, the multi-user and RBAC. Like not everyone should be able to do everything. I think we need to define like which user should see which board and which work tree. So kind of boiled it down to that essence, created this framework. And now like the really cool thing that I haven't talked too much about, but it's the internal Agor MCP. So all your agents in Agor can interact with the system. So you can say, hey, can you find a session where we work on this? Or like, what is like Camille been working on over the past week? And the agent can go and read the work trees, the sessions. It can also like, there's all these assistants with memory systems. So I think the assistant, or what I call an assistant, which is really like a claw in some way, an open claw, those are extremely useful too. So that's how you get kind of meta. But now you have an agent that has access to all these primitives.
Yep.
You can have an agent that, monitors your GitHub issues and like creates a board for each issue, or you can kind of do anything from that perspective. So, you can have there's a strong system of callbacks too. So an agent can ask any other agent a question. I was afraid on like the chain reaction effect, I'm like, well, if I tell an agent, it could call an agent, I could call an agent, at some point but like maybe at some point we do need some restraints and some constraints, right? So I haven't built any quota management right now, but I could have quota in here, right? And budgets, and you can do cool stuff like sharing accounts too. So if you have like some people that are not maxing out your Max Pro plan, Anthropic account.
Share their like unused quota.
Yes, it's pretty easy. You could ask an agent to be like, monitor the, and then once this account is ended, like move it and make sure that certain people are sharing a certain way, right? Track the cost. So like cost tracking is really great. Like the observability is insane in here because once you bring it all in one place, you can see like, who burned how much token, which projects are burning tokens, which type of tasks, so you get the whole like token accounting, which has been kind of crazy realization. I realized that the Cloud Max Pro plan, I'm able to spend like, I think 10 to 20K a month on that 200.
Something like that.
It's insane.
I thought it's like 6K or something a month.
I think I've broken over that a few times. Yeah. It depends. You have to maximize like your week. I think there's a week quota.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got 2 accounts now and I'm struggling to keep the 2. But my plan is to get like, if I can have 5, $200 Cloud Max Pro plan, I'll probably do it. And then more and more things get automated. The cool thing is like we used to only be able to automate things that are very deterministic and clear cut. Now we're able to automate things with judgment to say like, if this feature is small enough, the PR is small enough, you don't necessarily need a codex reviewer. You don't need that extra step, right? Or you can merge yourself. So that I think I've started to see some success on like agents being able to use, because workflows are not always like hard, right?
Yeah.
Some are soft. There's some judgment to use, and that's what you end up doing as the human, dragging the cards around.
Yeah.
But you can teach your agent that. You can be like, listen, if you see another one like this one, feel free. Like you give more and more agency to the agent.
Yeah, I totally see that flexibility in the orchestration layer where you can basically use natural language to say, well, if this is like, some condition, like for example, I'm working on some benchmark, right? If this hardness change is going to impact benchmark, you got to like do a staff review and then run a proper smoke for that. Otherwise, you can go through a lighter process. So you describe that in natural language, it worked. Right.
Yeah. And, one thing that might be difficult is like, if you don't have a framework like Agor, it might be hard to do certain things. So like an example, like a concrete example might be some PRs need like QA, right? Like, and when I say QA, that means like spinning up an environment, going in the environment and clicking around, making sure that all the features work as expected. So like beyond, unit tests and maybe integration tests, you might need like manual review. And then right now I do this through Playwright MCP, right? And then not all the tickets need that, but some tickets you can say, if it's that level of complexity, fire up an environment, right? Because like the agent is able to start the Docker environment and then create a test plan, spawn a subsession for an agent to go and run your test plan and produce a report.
Yeah, or recording.
Right. Or like I asked the agent to like take screenshots with Playwright MCP now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. So, so it will produce like these little GIF videos to prove, because we had like some false positives. So I was like, you'd better take, a short video that shows you clicking on this thing and deleting this thing and making sure. that it works, but you don't always need that. So what's the workflow? Well, tell the agent, that there's a section of your board maybe that requires this set of prompts or guarantees or whatever it is. And then if the ticket qualifies, like put it there and I start this alternative workflow.
Cool. You talked about kind of the cycle for like kind of technology, right? I want to bring this back to kind of like when you ship like Airflow or like Superset, what did kind of each of those category look like? I mean, right now, agent orchestration is a new thing, and I'm assuming it's a little bit crowded. Like there's a lot of like
Oh yeah.
tools, right? But what was the kind of the state of thing were when you were like working on Airflow and Superset?
Yeah, so Airflow, I think like the greatest thing at the time was probably there was something called Uzi that was not great, like JVM based. I think people were shifting to Python. And then there was Luigi
Yeah,
that was like maybe smaller in scope and
more decorative.
yeah, and then there was some things I didn't like, about Luigi, but I looked at the stuff and then, started writing code while at Airbnb. And I think there was a lot less noisy back then, right? It's like someone like Airbnb as open source, something like mattered at the time. I would say right now there's like the signal to noise is very low. So it's really hard. I really think like Agor is like a 50,000 stars, 100,000 stars on GitHub type project. But it's been hard to get people's attention because there's so much stuff happening right now. And I think people are also thinking like, hey, I haven't really organized my own workflow. Like I'm not ready to bring my team in.
Oh,
So I think the big value premise is like, I think that people at some point will be like, how do we collaborate as a team with armies of agents? I think a lot of people are just simply not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But it is exhilarating kind of what you see when you start to see other people's cursors and their sessions and their boards and the assistants that they create. And they bring these assistants on Slack, and then we figure out how to connect like the entire company to an MCP. So it's not just like, oh, I've connected that MCP, you should install it too. It's like, no, we've installed it for everyone. Just start a session, add the MCP.
Right.
But yes, I think the landscape has changed. I would say the signal to noise, right? Like what are the 3 projects you should look at or play with right now is too many.
Too many.
But this is the right one. Like, if you're listening to the podcast, this is the one thing you should look at.
You should definitely try it. Yeah.
But even like, I feel like I have some street creds around creating these things too, but it's hard to get, I was trying to get talks at like larger conferences, like maybe the agentic conference. I'm like, oh, I'm going to use my credentials, to go and, present this thing to the world. But I think like people might not even see whether it's special or not because there's just too many things.
Even for the majority of my kind of senior engineering friend only get started to this like in December last year, right? And then you're like a couple months ahead. And another thing is like a lot of people don't realize they have a workflow.
Yeah, or they don't think that this workflow can be automated by an agent. But like that's one thing that the big breakthrough, I think for me, my Claude Code moment was this time last year, and then I really dropped everything and went full agentic. I think I've been having 2 Claude Max Pro plans since then. But like the agents were not doing that well. The breakthrough, I think, from December is like agents got really good with tools and with orchestration, or at least like that's something I changed. And then just accuracy rate, like there was a lot less dead end. All of a sudden, like success rate on got, very expanded across complexity of tasks.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's crazy though is like if you're like, oh, you're kind of ahead of the market in some ways on this. Isn't that crazy to be kind of ahead of market and this like this biggest like tech revolution and like maybe we're the next train station or like 2 train stations, but it's unclear if the train is going to fly, like in the end, the only prompt you might need might just be like build something relevant and make money,
Make it happen.
Yeah, that's it. Work harder.
Yeah.
But no, I think for a moment we're going to be like figuring out agent orchestration this year. I think that brings questions around like security and like what agent identity and what they should have access to. Or do they lease the user's permission, the prompter's permission, or do they have like their own service account and identity?
Separate service account.
Yeah, like Okta for agents, I think is probably happening this year.
Yeah, there are like key cards and other companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also curious because you're like, these are kind of like maybe third major project you're working on. What's kind of the pattern across like all 3? Like, do you realize that there's like a design philosophy or a way of thinking that you only realize once you started a third project?
Yeah, or if I have like a style, or like a
Yeah.
certain approach, I think I just start building stuff. The magic really happens when you use the stuff that you're building every day, right? If you try to build a product for your
Someone
neighbor,
else.
for someone else, like, and you're not like a subject matter expert, but for me, I'm like really trying to crack agentic coding. So I'm using Agor to build Agor since, I started it in the fall. And there's some magic that happens there, but, some of the skills that are really important in this era that I think I'm like decent at is like modeling, just in general. Like, what is the, thinking information architecture, entity relationship diagram, feature mapping, mocking the stuff. I've gotten decent with like UI design while working on Superset because it's so like data viz is so UI heavy. But I think it's like this attention to detail, maybe like modeling ability. And then like just like the drive to build, of like, yeah, it's gonna do this, gonna do that. And something interesting that's like a side, like more on the personal side, like I realized like talking to ChatGPT that I might be on the ADHD spectrum in some ways, like a lot of founders and builders are.
Oh yeah,
Like a
totally.
high functioning ADHD, but like I think
Yeah.
that this era is serving us very well, like people
Oh
that have tons of ideas. And you can start everything. You're like, I'm gonna get
yeah,
an agent to work on this, work on that. And then maybe it's like 30, 50, 60% of stuff works. But like
yeah,
this drive to like try a lot of things, being creative, trying everything is really, really good right now.
yeah.
But I think there's something to be learned of like the ADHD type traits of like, be creative. Like you can try, like you want to build this feature, like put an agent on it.
Yeah, I feel like completely. This is actually one, my own line I was sharing with my team was like, wow, I'm working on 3 like projects across like 7 terminals. This is like make my ADHD brand very happy, but this is probably not sustainable. I need to find a better way to organize all these terminal tabs.
Yeah, well, there you go. So maybe that's what it is, and it could be that my vision or approach kind of fits a certain mindset, and I think we're going to see that now that everyone can build the thing that fits their mindset, which is good in many ways, right? If you have a certain approach, you want your workflow to look a certain way, and you can build a custom app.
Right.
But where we're losing is that now, what everyone's got their own like framework, right? So I think like the collaboration, if we're all enabled to in this software utopia to have exactly the workflows and the apps that we want, how do we work together? And there is like there are some clear places where we need to talk internally of like what is the quality bar to merge a PR,
Yeah.
what is good enough of a test plan, and then maybe want to standardize some of these prompts as skills or as zones or it's unclear. Like once multiple people on the team, an agentic team agrees on a certain process, like how are you supposed to implement that? Is that like skills in the repo that you're working on? Is there skills in a skill repo that you import? So right now, I think we're all kind of scattered brain and kind of scattered on our laptops. So like offering a place to bring it back together is an interesting proposal. I think like get out of your local and like come work on the team space.
So what I'm hearing is that, well, I mean, everyone's trying to build their own like workflow, but we gotta find a way to have the common abstraction, common language, or agree on a way to work together. In the kind of software engineering or product building world, I guess there's a lot of talk about the collapse of the EPD, right? Engineering, product, and design, right? It's like, well, you're all product builder, but you specialize in engineering, or you specialize in product, right? And everyone's coming from a very different angle. And how do we work together? But for Agor, it's definitely like with that, and then for your own team. But are you seeing similar kind of phase shift for data roles for like data teams or companies?
Starting with EPD even, right? Like I think it's clear that the roles are collapsing. So maybe you come from a design background, you come from an engineering background, or you come from a QA background, but it's pretty clear that now everyone can do everything. So then it becomes more about agency. I think we're also realizing the bottlenecks are where people need to interact, right? You need a code review. So someone else got to git pull, look at where you were thinking, kind of load that into their wetware and make some decisions.
Burn their human tokens.
Yeah, they're human tokens. And it gets rough, right? Because you're already in 7 sessions, and now you got to start an 8th session to review someone else's code. You have no idea what they were doing. But I think like embracing the collapse is great. So to tell everyone internally, for me to say like everyone is a member of technical staff, and your role is to find impact and then to automate this, and then to go find impact again and automate that. Right. So I think that's always been good advice for any type of career. It just used to be a lot harder to automate things.
Right.
I would say it's still the same approach and still the same thing for the collapse of the data team too. So I don't know, data engineer, analyst engineer, data analysts, data ops specialists. Like that's just one role. Like you're just member of technical staff dash data. And you can probably get rid of the data if you want, or maybe that's just explains where you come from. But I think still there is like, look at what I tell people is like, look for, I mean, it's just stupid of a, recommendation, but it's also the core of it. Look for impact, automate the space, and then move on, go find the greatest thing of impact in your neighborhood.
Wow, this is great. So I think last time you talked about like one of the main problem with like data teams, there hasn't really been a renaissance in data model, right? And a couple months passed. Do you think that's changed, or like it is not necessary because like agents gonna answer all the questions with data modeling that we don't have to care?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think is data modeling more important? I think modeling though is a good skill, whether it's data modeling or application modeling, abstraction. I think the really hard thing is to figure out what's hard and what's soft, and then by that I mean like what are the places where we need the super strong constraints and guarantees versus the places where agents can just go do whatever the heck they want to solve our problem, right? What are the clear areas where we need more constraint things and more clear verification? So maybe data modeling, is still a good skill to have, but then could you get away with just letting your agents data model, just like match the pattern that you see in the data warehouse or use Kimball style? That's good enough for me. The one thing that people have been talking about too is like the skill that might matter most is like the clarity of intent. Like what is it that you want, and what does good look like? Right. So maybe that goes on software engineering, that goes towards the PM, like the PM maybe, or the designer is like, this is how I want for the mechanics of the product to work. Could you go like only on that front and be like, I don't care what you built as long as what you ship is a perfect product the way I want to see it? The agents could have bad architecture or pick the wrong library and make other mistakes in other areas. So I think it all kind of matters, but then you can kind of trust agents across the surface there. So it's like just having enough knowledge to be able to like correct and steer the right way across the board. So go wide as opposed to getting like very specialized in a vertical is the way like everyone should flatten and go wide, so that's a clear thing. And then you find impact and you go end to end. Like you don't, if you need a QA person, that means that you're not good enough of an engineer or an EPD person, right? Or if you need a designer, it's probably a sign that you're not working with agent on design like well enough. So it's like try to carry stuff end to end, minimize like the number of like human handoff. It's probably key, or recognize when you need it, maybe. So it's not just like don't use a designer. It's like just only use the designer when you really need one, because this is a hard design problem.
Okay. While we are all in this like wild 2026, like where do you see the durable role for humans in agentic work? Like for example, in 2 years, are we always just saying like make it so and it will happen, or like are we reviewing plans or code more?
2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, it's like like 2 years is long, because like
6 months is hard to say.
But I do think that people relentlessly seeking impact, people orchestrating a lot of agents, trying to automate the crap out of everything is super key. Maybe the ADHD traits of like, no, I actually, I'm happy when I have 20 or 30 agents working for me. Those are good skills. The other skill I see as like super important in this particular era, I'm not sure if it carries in 2 years, but is AI enablement. So like if you're figuring out how to do this stuff, like you're working with more agents than the average person in your team, you need to help them figure out how to use more agent, parallelize more work. And I could not offer a better platform than Agor to do that because you can, you can go and set them up on a board. You can prompt their session. They can see what you're doing. You can kind of comment on there to share some practices and things like that. So I think AI enable. At some point, I was thinking about like almost rebranding Agor, not rebranding, but like bringing to messaging positioning something around like this is the perfect platform for AI enablement. Like you need to help others multiply themselves. So if you're a 10x engineer, 100x engineer today, and there are still like 3x engineers in your team, you need to go help them. You have more impact in bringing people up than like trying to get the next multiplier for you, maybe. Or it's like a balance. Find your next multiplier, bring people up the pyramid, and then what's blocking there? I think it's like people don't see good examples or good workflows. It's all encapsulated on your laptop. So it's hard to share and learn like that new works. If the nature of work is to orchestrate a bunch of agents in 2026, how do you learn how to do that well? By doing, probably, right?
Yeah.
But by seeing is good too.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess before we wrap, tell us more about kind of the licensing choice for Agor. I know this is the BSL license, right? And then how did you arrive on it? Are you planning to offer like a commercial service alongside preset?
Yeah, I wanted to like keep that option open. And, that's interesting because I'm hardcore open source. All my projects are like super open licenses. But when I started building this thing, I was like, oh, I might change my mind later and open it further or close it further. But I was like, a BSL seems like a good thing because just for people not familiar with like those like more copyleft licenses, it means like the code's open source, you can use it, but you just can't commercialize it yourself. So I was like, if there's going to be someone, if we have an open claw moment of like 100,000 stars on GitHub and like everyone starts using this thing, I like the privilege of being the only person who can commercialize it, or for my company to be able to commercialize it. I might reconsider too. Like I don't think it's a real blocker for anyone today, to use the open source as far as a user or for you or for your team is open source the same way. It's just you can't make money off of it. So that seemed like a good trade-off, and if that was a real blocker to adoption, I might go Apache too. But you spend some of your creative juices building something. It's good to be able to retain some commercial stuff. Also, like I know the model with pure Apache too, which is what we're doing, with preset and superset, which is similar to what Confluent is doing with Kafka or what Databricks did, is doing with Spark. If you have a model where you don't protect your commercial rights, then you're incentivized to do open core and then build a lot of crust around it, which is also not ideal, right? So I could have said like Agor is Apache too, but the artifact feature, like some of the coolest features would be only commercial. I think it's better instead of putting it there to put it on BSL and just retain a commercial right. So, if people have like strong thoughts around it too, I'm curious to hear them, but it just seemed like a fair balance today, like nowadays,
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And then before like we get into the lightning round, anything that we should have asked you and then or you want to cover?
I think we should talk about the existential stuff, which is like, what does that mean for all of us? So maybe my short answer is like, I do think we're going to some sort of like software utopia.
Or singularity?
Well, singularity is definitely happening. By the way, like I read the singularity is near back in like 2006 or 7. And like I was like, oh my God, if this ever happens, is like I saw it and I was like, this is gonna be so cool to live through it. Like I really hope.
Yeah, within our lifetime.
Within our lifetime. And then here we are, on track for the singularity, well into it. So really believe it's happening. But yeah, some of the existential questions, also software utopia is happening. I think digital transformation of like all I think the tech companies take over the rest of the world, or there's more money that comes to Silicon Valley until everything gets commoditized and free forever. But I think there's a lot more opportunities, I think, for Silicon Valley to transform the commercial world in general. And then like from a personal perspective, the only thing I kind of tell people is like find impact, automate it, and go find more impact. And then try a lot of things, push the boundaries, explore the horizon of like what the agents can and can't do today, and be smart and then keep pushing. I think that's generally a good recipe. But yeah, I don't know. The other thing that's interesting, I think, in the existential question is like that's probably good time to go and start a company too, or maybe we're going to decentralize some of these companies.
What flavor of company are you talking about? Venture back or like one person unicorn?
I don't know. I think all of the above, right? I think all the models can work, but the bootstrap, like I'm just going to find a way to make money for me and my family, and maybe have an employer too, but small teams, disrupting big, doing something you're passionate about, maybe a subject area you really know. So if you really know like a specific area or type of work, you go build your own thing in that niche. But yeah, maybe it's a good time to start a business.
Right. Well, thank you for that advice. All right. So we're going to head into our lightning round. So quick question and then just like quick answer. Are you ready?
Ready.
Perfect. So best new tool you've added to your workflow in the last 6 months?
I think like something interesting is the rise of like artifacts, and then using something called Sandpack. Sandpack is like a way to like create an iframe and deploy an app inside of an iframe.
Oh, is it something like Sandstorm before?
I think it's a different thing though. That is very interesting. But Sandpack, if you're familiar with all of the JavaScript editors online, like the little IDEs where you can have like 5 files and then write a little JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and put an app together. These companies now are discovering their agentic, and they have the framework where you can, you have an API where you publish a small app and it's served there.
Okay.
And I do think like ephemeral apps is a big thing that's coming up, like just being able to like create these little apps and deploy them. Maybe dashboards become more that way in the future, like a custom dashboard that's just a micro app served in Superset or elsewhere, in chatbot session.
Cool. Next one. Most surprising thing an agent did for you this year, good or bad?
Yeah, I think it's just everything. Like the real issue is like I'm like, okay, like what is the hill that we try to defend, or what is the place of retreat? And then I'm realizing that there is just about nothing. But like everything you do, like a workflow you do today, could be done better with an agent. Maybe the first time might be as long as doing it yourself. It's probably going to be faster even the first time. The second time you do it, and 10 times after as you organize the workflow, probably better done with an agent, assuming memory system access, like the right skills, access to the right systems. So I think what's amazing me is that there is just like nothing left, that you cannot automate, or that you cannot get a better result with an agent, which is insane.
Okay, so you're surprised by that. You thought there was something to defend.
Yeah, I mean, and then testing the boundaries, like things that clearly didn't work before, or were clunky, or were getting in the way. Like these things are like melting very, very quickly. If you retest something that didn't work 3 months ago, or in the fall, it's likely that it works now.
Yeah, I find joy where like I can tell the agent, well, this is over engineered, and then this is a better like construct that you can simplify. But I'm assuming this is getting better, and that we can like have that principle embedded in the initial design. Then they should be following that. But right now, I'm still enjoying like pushing back. It's like, well, this is over engineered.
Oh yeah, there's definitely like all my prompts are like it's got to be dry. It's got to be like take that like concise. Don't overthink it. You're absolutely right, But yeah, I think like a lot of that, maybe some of the things that people observe out of Asian that was like bad behavior. Like if you have the right framework and prompts and, agents MD or Claude.md, that can be addressed pretty easily. So I haven't found like the areas where, there's no way to get the agent to do well. I think it's struggling a little bit with like manual tests, like with a headless browser, like a lot of false positive, false negative, but it's
right.
Next model is going to be much better at that. And it's already like much better than like what doing manual tests, like who's doing manual tests.
Okay. Next one, what's the model you reached for first and why? Like which flavor of LLM model?
Yeah, so I'm always like 4.7, 4.6 now. So like there's been like I've had a good experience with 4.7. So Opus 4.7.
Opus 4.7.
People were like, oh, it's not good because the thinking budget is lower than 4.6. So I've been like between 4.6 and 4.7. But I could show in Agor, you get to pick your default models and default settings, default configuration for all of your models. But yeah, I'm on 4.7 now.
Okay.
And then a lot of codecs 5.5 for like code review.
It's pretty good.
Or when I run out of tokens. But like for review, I would say never merge a PR authored by Claude without getting a Codex 5.5 review. And then you get like a different perspective on the model. So for me, like, often I do like multiple reviews. I'll do Codex 5.5, Claude itself, Gemini, and then ask the agent to wait for the 3 agents to bring it all together.
Okay, so next thing, you talk about a lot of like automate and find impact, but like outside work, have you like automate something that's kind of your life since we last talked?
Yeah, have I done some of that? I think I've at some point I've got a Mac Studio behind me that I put all of my more personal. So I have an instance of Agor there that's running with access to my personal email, personal calendar. I planned a trip to Japan and got the agent to like do all the reservation and the flights searching. So that was maybe 2 months ago, but like I planned like a 2-week trip to Japan.
Wow, nice.
All agentically, and through a headless browser and all that stuff.
Very cool. And then this is, to be clear, like the agent on your Mac Mini, not a travel agent, right?
Yeah. Yes. Do travel agents still exist? No. But yeah, no, all of the Mac Mini, and it was cool because like I had access to the agent remotely, like through text message. So during my trip, I could be like, okay, what's the reservation for tonight? Or like, okay, for tomorrow, at what time's the flight tomorrow? And at what time should we leave the hotel? Like do the math and then did not hit any issues, right? Like that would be pretty bad if the agent hallucinate, like your flight is the wrong date, but that worked out very well.
Very cool. All right. So last one, can you finish the sentence? Like in 5 years, every data team will be what?
Will be member of technical staff.
Wow, that's great.
Right. Like, so the new title, and I mentioned that already, and talking today, but I think if you go look at the titles of people who work at Anthropic or OpenAI, I think they're all like member of technical staff. So, I would say either just pure member of technical staff or a member of technical staff -data, with a data focus. But yeah, I think the rule's going to collapse and everyone's going to become wider. I don't know if we're going to re-specialize after that or if it's just going to be, find impact and be technical.
Yeah. Well, I guess from one of the sci-fi I love is like, well, you got to have the role in the future that's kind of the program archaeologist, right? So those people who like, we are the few people who understand the actual code at that time.
Right. I wonder if there's a craft, because like, shoemaking got industrialized and then, there's a handful of shoemakers left. But
yeah, I
wonder if there's going to be like, oh, I want an app like in jQuery, 2005 style, CSS 2.0. I want it to feel just like, Amazon felt in 2002. But yeah, I think there's nothing there though. I would say like through the Industrial Revolution, there was like a push for like craft, right? Like, or like you're a woodworker and you do it the old way with the old methods. And this is better than like industrial crap. But I don't know if that will exist for software. My hunch is no. And they'll just give up on that already. Find something else to do. I mean, yeah, there's all like, maybe if there is like a true like utopia or abundance, like people call it, that, there's more room for like art and social and being like closer to friends and family and find like a different kind of value there, or like a service industry where it's like humans go together places and organize things. But I think it's going to be a while before there's like a full-blown economy around like, experiences out there. Maybe not a bad place to be if there's going to be abundance, there's going to experiences become like a cool thing. So maybe that's like push your hobbies on the side and maybe start a business at some point if you have nothing else.
Yeah, I will add to that. Let's try to make this abundance happen, not dystopian.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining, Max.
It was a pleasure. Love talking to you.
That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on datarenegades.com. Data Renegades is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in enterprise infrastructure. For more information, visit heavybit.com.